When we think of innovation, we often just think of technology. However, it is much broader. We can create and find innovation in governance, policy, finance, and nature. And in this session titled How to Do Green Blue, we will explore innovations in nature-based solutions. We need them now more than ever because communities are facing increasing threats from climate change, in particular from heavy rainfall and extreme heat events. According to the IPCC, 44% of all disaster events on Earth have been flood-related, and 700 million people live in regions where maximum daily rainfall has increased. Natural infrastructure is not only extremely effective in managing floodwater, but it also brings far wider benefits than traditional engineered or gray infrastructure. Nature-based innovations offer solutions for climate resilience, for mitigation and adaptation to extreme weather events, for carbon reduction, and also for nature and biodiversity. What's not to like? So we do know the benefits of nature-based solutions, but too often they are not implemented at the scale required to create lasting change. So in this roundtable, we will hear about ways to enhance the role of natural infrastructure and how to elevate its impact in the fight against the climate crisis. I am Rodrigo Ordóñez, Head of Communications at the International Water Management Institute, and today we have a stellar panel of speakers who will share with us real-life solutions. So first, we will hear from Daniel Morchan, Global Director of Climate Adaptation at the Nature Conservancy. Morchan leads the development and implementation of a common adaptation vision and agenda across the organization. He specializes in delivering nature-based, nature-positive solutions that reduce the impacts of climate change and help communities build their resilience. Very welcome, Daniel. So the Nature Conservancy has a number of water funds around the world. And what is the model you are using, and how are you scaling them?
Yes. Thank you, Rodrigo, and thanks for having us in the panel. Before going into that, I wanted to say something, which is that I really like how you framed it. You know, the innovation is also very much about governance processes, about partnership, and that's so key. You know, and I also like another thing you said, when you were talking about nature-based solutions, you said what's not to like. Well, there are things that maybe we don't like, right? Because precisely, you know, to do it right, you have to have the right partnership. So a wrong partnership, a top-down, exclusively top-down partnership, you know, that's not going to work, and that's something not to like. And I think that really aligns with what you're saying. You know, when you're thinking about nature-based solutions, it's so much about the governance, so much about the partnership. So in that context, I wanted to share a few thoughts about this way that we are creating these partnerships. Yeah? So, and I will talk about two examples. And actually, the two examples that I will speak to, they happen to be in the global north, but we have these examples globally. The first one is in the UK, the Norfolk Water Strategy Program. And the Norfolk Water Strategy Program is the first in the UK, the first water fund in the UK. And the first actual water fund ever was in Quito, Ecuador. So let me say a couple of things about the water funds, which are part of our resilient watershed strategy. So basically, the idea is to mainstream nature-based solutions in the water sector to achieve both conservation and adaptation objectives. Concretely, we also seek to demonstrate the nature-based solutions work, because that's a big challenge, right? Like, what is the benefit that I get out of this? What's the limit of the benefit that this gives? I think I'm not claiming here nature-based solutions will be the only solution that is necessary, but I think it is a really important part of the whole. Another concrete goal is to increase investment, so both through action and through policy, and to build the capacity of partners. And by increasing this investment in nature-based solutions, the idea is, like I was saying, not just to focus on conservation outcomes, but also in community resilience, adaptation objectives, let's say like water security and food security. So water funds are about community and collectivity. Basically what they are a multi-stakeholder process, or a governance and investment multi-stakeholder processes with watershed objectives focused on conservation and adaptation. Now, to go concretely on the Norfolk case. The Norfolk case is a PPP, a public-private partnership between TNC, the Nature Conservancy, Water Resources East, Water Resources East, Anglian Water, and Norfolk County Council. And the objectives here, again, is to address water security and to support freshwater conservation. It established a collective action platform to coordinate implementation, monitoring, and to fundraise, really, at the county level in the UK in order to make this a long-standing water fund. Give you a sense of the concrete work that is being done here. Well, one is to create wetlands, to restore rivers and floodplains, to build buffer strips, and to plant trees, with the bigger vision of boosting wildlife recovery and to create opportunities for farmers to diversify income. So a lot of the communities in this area are farming communities. So the diversification of livelihood income or of income is really important. And a final point on the Norfolk example is that there's also a lot of science happening, a lot of science-based modeling that seeks to understand the extent of which nature-based solutions can deliver water outcomes. So to give that science background, what can you expect into the future? And there is the advocacy component, as I mentioned policy before. This is being done in parallel to the development of the regional water resource management plan for Eastern England. And the idea is that this will really inform the priorities and the thinking behind that strategy. So I wanted to jump then to the other example that I wanted to share with you today, which is called floodplain by design. This is happening in Washington State in the US, so the northernmost, westernmost state in the US, I guess, if you don't count Alaska. So let me throw three factoids your way. One is that because they are a source of fresh water, river corridors and floodplains have been the subject to intense human development across the decades. So let's keep that as one factor in our mind right now. Another one is the flooding is the most common and costly disaster globally. And the third one is the freshwater biodiversity has decreased much faster recently than marine or terrestrial biodiversity. And all of these factors really make or have an impact in indigenous communities and in disenfranchised communities disproportionately compared to other social groups. So that's also a really important part of the thinking for creating floodplain by design. I'd say, and maybe relatively, I'll say the key word here is relatively. Relatively, there are not too many examples of nature-based solutions really informing policy and making it into, informing also funding allocation by governments. But I think that the floodplain by design is one of them. Tell you a little bit about what this is. It really goes to the point of partnership. So the floodplain by design is a community-driven collaborative governance framework that seeks multiple benefits. So we're thinking here conservation, adaptation, but also recognize what are farming needs and how can those things that sometimes are clashing with one another, is there a way to advance the objectives of all of these diverse stakeholders? And it really combines the top-down government funding and policy levers with the local action. So here, an important part of this partnership establishment was that we're not just working at the ground, or let's say with local organizations, local farmers, local communities. They are an essential part of the partnership, but equally are partnerships with state-level governments. They are essential there to keep this not only integrated and scale it up, but also to fund all the work that is happening here. So I'll give you a couple of numbers about that. The work that we do here is at watershed scale, and like I was saying, it's driving really not only state-level funding, but also policy changes. The concrete impacts this work has had in Washington State, it is that it has reduced the flood risk in 63 communities, restored or improved 71 miles of river habitats, improved 12,000 acres of crop and shellfish farm land, and improved or established 28 recreational areas. And what we're doing here also is expanding this. So this model has worked in the state of Washington. Now we are trying to do this, we're exploring if there are enough conditions to do this in southern states in the United States where there is a similar big flood risk, and also globally, perhaps starting in Latin American countries. or watersheds, let's say, in Latin American countries. So there's a multiplicity of partners here that I think is really important to the success of floodplain by design. And I'll just, if I have a minute, Rodrigo, I'll just say a final thing, which is that for me, you know, in my role as global director of the Global Climate Change Adaptation Team, for me, it's all really about partnerships. It's not all about partnerships, but like a huge chunk of it is partnerships. And I'll tell you this, you know, I'm having meetings here, and we've been setting up a number of conversations with the IFRC, the International Federation of the Red Cross, Red Crescent, to bring together their expertise and ours. We actually have already projects, for example, on disaster risk management, where nature-based solutions come into that, and our strengths really reinforce one another. Or I just come here actually to Dubai. I arrived this morning from meetings in Rome with the CGIAR, and you know, all of the agricultural research that is happening. I think historically, agriculture and conservation have been not the best of friends. No, they're kind of going towards different objectives, but realizing that, you know, the objectives are bigger than conservation, the objectives are bigger than agricultural production. You really are talking about water security, food security, community resilience. Organizations to come out of their comfort zone and partner with organizations that are not necessarily the natural partners, you know, is so important. And for me, that's when we're working on climate adaptation, that's really at the center of everything. You cannot silo things. You have to really be collaborative. And that's what I hope the two examples that I shared have given a little bit of a sense of.
Thank you. Definitely the role of partnerships and joining the dots between energy, water, policy, energy, agriculture, and everything between. And next we have Ms. Lilan Basu, Nature-Based Solutions Program Officer at the International Union for Conservation of Nature at UCN. During her professional career in West Africa, she's worked with the Global Water Partnerships and IGN France International. Her experience focuses on risk and disaster management, and she has supported the implementation of various sustainable development projects, strengthening the resilience of communities in the face of natural hazards, including river floods, coastal erosion, submersion, etc. Welcome. You'll be speaking in French, if I'm not mistaken. I'll be doing my best to translate and summarize. Yeah. So could you please give us some examples of nature-based solutions that support water adaptation and climate resilience in your region in West Africa?
Thank you, Rodrigo. And let's be fair with French speakers. So in terms of... In French.
Mm-hmm, please, yeah. S'il vous plaît.
En termes d'exemples, on a quelques exemples en Afrique de l'Ouest sur la contribution des solutions fondées sur la nature dans l'adaptation et aux risques liés à l'eau. Et parmi ces exemples, on peut citer essentiellement la restauration des zones humides, qui est une solution.
So one of those examples is the restoration of humid zones, humid areas.
Voilà, c'est une solution très importante parce qu'elle apporte, elle joue un rôle de tampon et qui régule les débits d'eau, régulant ainsi les problèmes d'inondation qu'on peut avoir, en particulier dans nos villes.
So it plays a role of regulation of the flow of water.
Un autre exemple, c'est la restauration de mangroves, qui aide également à prévenir les risques, notamment d'érosion et de submersion. Nous travaillons au niveau de l'Afrique de l'Ouest dans différents projets qui visent vraiment à promouvoir ce genre de solutions afin de contrer les problèmes d'érosion qui sont importants au niveau de l'Afrique de l'Ouest.
Another example is with mangroves, who play a key role in preventing erosion and flooding as well. And IUCN has a number of projects on that.
Un autre exemple dont je voudrais parler, c'est vraiment tout ce qui est infrastructure verte dans les villes. Je voudrais parler des surfaces engazonnées, des surfaces d'infiltration qui vont aider vraiment à on va dire, régler les problèmes de perméabilité et accroître la résilience des villes.
One more on the issues of, I'm sorry if I'm like in the technical language here, infiltration, which also can affect, have an impact on villages and communities.
Et un exemple, un dernier exemple que je voudrais évoquer, c'est l'agriculture durable. Je reviens il y a quelques jours d'un voyage en Côte d'Ivoire où j'ai pu visiter des parcelles d'agriculture basées sur l'intégration des arbres, des espèces forestières, l'utilisation de compost et autres pratiques agricoles durables à l'intérieur même de la ville d'Abidjan et qui est pratiquée par des migrants, des migrants internes et internationaux venus d'un peu partout dans la région qui travaillent dans ce secteur-là et à qui cela apporte beaucoup de bien-être.
And she just came from a trip in Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire where she could witness sustainable agriculture just outside the capital, Abidjan. And there's a lot of domestic migrants from other parts of the country who work in sustainable agriculture, including practices like composting, integrating agroforestry, etc.
Voilà, et le bénéfice vraiment qu'apportent les SFN en termes d'approche, c'est donc pas seulement l'adaptation, tout simplement, c'est tout ce que ça apporte comme co-bénéfice, et c'est en cela que cette approche est particulièrement intéressante.
So this approach as a whole is very beneficial because of all the benefits that it brings, regardless of the technique that you apply. Okay. And then one more question. Yeah, so this one is at the heart sometimes of the debate. We often have competing pressures for development with nature, especially in our urban areas. So how can the objectives for implementing nature-based solutions and development be integrated?
Merci, c'est une très bonne question. En effet, on a besoin de se développer. On aspire de plus en plus à des villes modernes, avec des infrastructures modernes. On veut réduire la pauvreté, on veut de meilleures conditions pour nos communautés. Et face à cela, on a besoin de se développer, forcément. Mais dans ce mécanisme-là, on met beaucoup de pression sur les ressources naturelles. Et c'est ce que l'approche des SFN essaye un peu de régler, de faire en sorte qu'on puisse à la fois atteindre notre objectif de développement, mais également s'assurer vraiment de préserver les ressources naturelles dans cette approche-là, parce qu'on comprend aujourd'hui que c'est un système et que si on ne fait pas attention, ben, tout va s'écrouler. Donc, il faut forcément qu'on puisse prendre en compte cette considération d'intégrer vraiment la nature dans les planifications. Voilà. Et pour y arriver...
So particularly in the urban environment, we always want a better life, a more modern life with all the benefits of that. And that's where nature-based solutions are helping to integrate those goals while keeping natural resources so all the different benefits that we've talked about are also apply there. And there's the systems, there's the food systems, the energy systems, etc.
Thank you. Donc pour y arriver, l'idée c'est vraiment à la base d'intégrer déjà la nature dans la réflexion. Il faut que la nature soit une réflexion à l'avance et pas tardive. Quand on a déjà tout mis en place, on vient rajouter un peu de ci, de ça. Non, il faut que ça soit une réflexion à l'avance et qui puisse vraiment intégrer la nature dans tous les plans de développement qu'on met en place. Et cela notamment à travers une planification urbaine durable pour ce qui est des villes, à travers un zonage qui nous permettent d'avoir de réserver vraiment une partie de l'espace pour la nature et pour pouvoir vraiment l'intégrer au développement.
So, yeah, sorry, I missed the point a bit. Yeah, so it's, oh yeah, so the nature must be first and foremost right at the beginning of development plans for cities. So it's integrated, it's not an afterthought, and it's part of the city or the urban planning, so that we know how to integrate those resources, how to integrate the cities into nature, and things like sustainable living, and etc.
Un dernier point que j'ai oublié et dont Daniel avait parlé, c'est surtout le point sur l'éducation et la sensibilisation pour un changement de comportement et vraiment le renforcement de capacité de toutes les parties qui interviennent pour accompagner leur engagement dans ce processus-là.
And one last element and link to what Daniel was talking about is mobilization and raising awareness. It's a key factor to make this happen, whether it's through partnerships or other methods. Yeah. Thank you. And next, our next speaker is joining us online is Mr. Thomas Westhoff, Technical Advisor at Wetlands International. So as Technical Officer for Nature-Based Solutions, Westhoff contributes to advancing building with nature principles globally with our winning EcoShape, a network of key water sector partners. And thank you for joining us, Thomas. One second while our technicians get it. Hi, Thomas. No, we cannot hear you. Yeah. I think we can hear you now.
All right.
Yeah, that works. Thank you, Thomas, for joining us. And you are lucky that you're not feeling the heat over here in Dubai. So your expertise is in wetlands, and you've worked a lot on the Dutch peatlands, for example, and in other locations as well. And wetlands are often seen as the hero of climate resilience. So I wanted to ask you, with success rates of wetland restoration programs ranging between 15 and 20%, what are the critical success factors needed for wetland restoration?
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, wetlands are truly seen as climate heroes, rightfully. For example, peatlands, as you mentioned, they store twice the amount of carbon than all forests combined. But also mangroves, as mentioned earlier, they are very carbon and biodiverse rich, but also protect us against floods. But at the same time, we see that large-scale mangrove restoration planting, where those numbers come from, show very low rates of success, often 15, 20%. And common issues of this failure in mangrove restoration include, for example, unrealistic goal settings, but also short project planning, stakeholder engagement time is often little, but also reliance on planting in unsustainable areas and without looking at the physical, ecological conditions at stake there. So tackling these failures have been a priority for Wetlands International over these past decades. And this year we published a landmark study together with other partners as part of the Global Mangrove Alliance on it. And the main message this report gave was that mangrove restoration should be thoughtfully planned out and really be based on proven methods, and also stimulate a feeling of stewardship over the area. And we call this then also community-based ecological mangrove restoration. So at one hand, it's really creating the right biophysical conditions for mangroves to grow back naturally. And on the other hand, it's creating the right socioeconomic conditions to incentivize also the long-term protection of these areas to really get intrinsically motivated communities that also can keep those restoration alive. And a good example of these guidelines in practice has been a project in the Mak on the island of Java in Indonesia. Recurring floods there were affecting 17,000 people, and more than 1,000 hectares of land were lost. Flooding was really a big issue in this area. And as common in this world, technical fixes are then brought in. So seawalls were built, but they were not effective. And via EcoShape, as you mentioned, which is a collaboration between more private industry, dredging companies, civil engineers, but also knowledge institutes, big universities, but also NGOs. A plan was executed to create semi-permeable seawalls made of local natural materials to trap the mud and sediments and to make the conditions right to let those mangroves grow. But at the same time, it was done hand in hand with local offices, local farmers, which also could earn 3 times as much because there was an additional charge for the shrimp they were growing in the mangroves that were created. And as you said, like the low succession rates of 15-20% normally were far exceeded with this project. There was a succession rate of 70 to 80%, and the project also won a UN World Restoration Flagship Award. And this project falls into the larger Building with Nature of EcoShape. There is a nice guideline on it, a book that passed Building with Nature. It's called, with examples in all kinds of landscapes all over the world. And they also identified some key enablers like adaptive management, maintenance and monitoring, multi-stakeholder approach, capacity building, technology and system knowledge, institutional embedding, and the creation of a business case. And I think those latter two, institutional embedding and the creation of a business case, is really something to look out for at COP. And we can critically reflect on these because it's often that nature-based solutions are really seen as more an option and are often in tenders, not really taken seriously. And that's something that has to change. It should not be just an option, it should be the norm. And happy to have that discussion. Wetlands will be on the ground soon too, and I will be there next week so I can experience the heat. But I think that should be really 2 key points to take forward at COP.
Thomas, this question was not on our run-off show, but I'm going to do a follow-up. If you were to, because that was a very specific example, if you were to do another project somewhere else, completely different context, what would be the basic, the must-have from that experience?
Yeah, I think it's very important to look at win-win solutions in that case. The intrinsic motivation is very important to let those projects be continued. And I think the key element of the project in the MAC was that it was really tackling a societal issue and also could create a way better alternative by creating mangroves with the production of shrimps in that to get an extra addition. And so I think that is really important to look out for, as the IUCN Global Standard also says, for nature-based solutions, it should tackle societal challenges with an ecosystem-based approach and really focus on improving biodiversity, but also human well-being. And in that sense, we can really create a positive story. And I think that should also be the story we tell about nature-based solutions. Yeah, a story of hope, how also the future can look like. Now involved in a project, how the Netherlands can look like in 100 years from now with nature-based solutions. And that's also the story we bring forward. A story of hope, and that we can create a more beautiful environment, and with those win-win solutions. So that is how I would approach it.
Thank you very much. And next is Lis Ellis, Associate Director at Arup. She is the Associate Director for Arup's UK Wastewater Advisory Team, with international expertise in resilience, asset management, and strategic planning in the water sector. Her work focuses on providing high-quality water resources and wastewater services for citizens and communities, and protecting them from water-related hazards, including climate change. And she has worked on projects across the world, from Rainscape Llanelli in Wales to protecting New York City's subways from flooding. Welcome, Lis.
Thank you very much.
So could you tell us a bit more about what tools are you using to scale nature-based solutions in the urban context in particular?
Absolutely. If we kind of take a little bit of a step back and acknowledge that we need to develop useful tools in this space and look at some of the that address some of the key challenges that are faced in the nature-based solution space, I'd probably touch on three main areas. The first is around the governance and collaboration surrounding nature-based solutions. The second is around having robust investment cases for nature-based solutions. And the third is being able to deploy them rapidly in the urban context, given the scale of some of the fastest growing cities in the world. If I take the first around encouraging collaboration, nature-based solutions sits in this. If we compare them to some of the grey infrastructure solutions like pipes, which clearly sit often in the utilities remit, nature-based solutions sit in a kind of murkier area where they overlap city government, utilities, transport authorities, health authorities. And therefore, their deployment requires significant collaboration. And we use tools such as the city water resilience approach, which brings together stakeholders in the water space in a city to firstly understand and get a collective understanding of the water challenges that are faced in a city, but then also work together to develop an action plan for the city relatively rapidly, acknowledging that perfect is often the enemy of good, and that it's often necessary to just get on with it. We've used this approach in 19 cities around the world, including Cape Town, Miami, Kigali, Addis Ababa, and most recently Lagos. And this tool, if I give the one example of Cape Town, we were in Cape Town working with the city water resilience approach during the Day Zero drought. Potentially not a time that you'd think nature-based solutions would come to the fore, but they absolutely did. And actually we did some of the engagement with the Nature Conservancy around their water fund in Cape Town at that time. And that formed, some of the work that TNC were doing formed a core part of that nature-based solutions action plan in Cape Town. And I think that shows the importance of kind of getting all of the actors in the city together to come up with a robust NBS strategy. The second is around developing this robust investment case around nature-based solutions. And if we look at some of the kind of traditional solutions, it's often the choice is a grey solution versus a green solution, a storage tank for flooding, for example, versus a stormwater planter. And they're often kind of compared on the basis of a cost of a solution versus the monetary benefit from, for example, reducing flood risk. But this completely ignores the additional benefits that the nature-based solution brings, be it biodiversity, climate mitigation, heat reduction, health and well-being benefits for communities. And therefore, we very much advocate taking this kind of total value approach, or often called kind of 6 capitals approach, where we look at the value of the solution across things like natural capital, social capital, human capital, rather than just considering the kind of financial and manufactured element of it. And this helps us really develop that robust business case for nature-based solutions. And also can help to underpin some of this kind of catchment trading market mechanisms for some of these wider kind of climate and biodiversity services. You can understand and unearth who's benefiting and therefore potentially who may be willing to pay to contribute to these catchment and urban nature-based solutions. The final element is around kind of this rapid deployment in the urban context. If we look at cities that have made a start in the deployment rapid deployment of nature-based solutions. For example, cities like New York City, which has its aim around 1 million trees. It also has a large stormwater planter program. The things that they have, adopted and found successful, and I should also say Shanghai are beginning to move into this space with their urban drainage plan, is having a city plan for nature-based solutions, and they're using technologies. For example, we have a technology called Terrain, which uses AI to take satellite imagery and uses that satellite imagery to understand what the current kind of grey-green split in the city is, along with the soil type data to understand kind of the baseline sponginess of the city, but also identify potential future areas using things like land use maps for where green and nature-based solutions can be deployed in the future. And this allows you to really open the conversation and share the art of the possible with city leaders, with utilities, around where nature-based solutions can be deployed. I think the final thing I'd probably say is that nature-based solutions have been talked about for a long time particularly in the kind of climate resilience and COP space. But what I'm really pleased that we're beginning to see is kind of wide-scale adoption, and particularly maybe in the UK, around the deployment of nature-based solutions as an alternative to some grey infrastructure. If I think of some of the water utilities in the UK, they're adopting this total value approach, and they are integrating nature-based solutions as part of their water industry national environment program, which I think is beginning to show, the success of some of these tools that we've talked about today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lis. And next, last but not least, is Sharin Hakim. She's a regional philanthropy lead for corporate sustainability at HSBC in the Middle East and Turkey. She has over 10 years of experience in sustainability with a significant focus on social and environmental impact agenda. And she's part of HSBC's regional corporate sustainability team based in Cairo, leading the sustainability strategy development and execution for initiatives and partnerships in areas like financial inclusion, accessibility, digital literacy, philanthropy, and climate-related projects. So thank you for joining us today. So I wanted to ask you if you could talk about what are the opportunities for nature and climate-related investment solutions that generate returns for the environment and society, as well as for the investor. And in your opinion, what is needed to make the case for nature-based climate solutions in investment cases?
Thank you, Rodrigo. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I will focus more my talk on the coastal ecosystem, because this is where we gained experience and we had various projects in. Well, the coastal ecosystem for nature-based solution is a vital part. It provides several benefits like food security, reduce carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, prevent coastal erosions, and support economic activities across the whole value chain. And despite of all the benefits that it gives, up till now, there's a limited finance has been allocated or channeled to the coastal nature-based solution. And this financing gap actually put down in the fact to the risks and the valuation mechanism of the projects and the required framework to encourage investment in this area. This was a big driver for HSBC, along with Barclays, in collaboration with the Pollination and SMI Financial Services Task Force, to launch a guidebook for financing the coastal NBS. And the guidebook actually titled with Mobilizing Commercial Capital for the Protection of Coastal Ecosystem. The practitioner guide provides the practical information needed to build a capacity and understand the NBS solution and critical steps towards closing the financing gap. In the report, there's a various examples of that showcase the success of how we can mobilize and unlock the barriers of the financing. And significant investment will flow once the risks and the opportunities are identified as well. So we focused on the guide on proposing definition of the NBS first, illustrating the role of different assets, and identifying the key consideration of financing. Some of the examples that already exist is sustainability-linked financing mechanisms that are introduced in various countries right now, structuring a thematic bond like the blue bond, for example, and supporting specialized natural capital funds, and some innovative financing mechanisms such as the payment of ecotourism, ecosystem services. Another example I want to give is our partnership with, our global partnership with WWF and WRI for the Climate Solution Partnership Program, which is a 5-year partnership where we allocated a total of 100 million USD to focus on nature-based solution and to have an accelerator program that can help unlock the barriers and scale the various projects on the NBS. And actually, our focus were in identifying the various projects that, for example, in Minet, let alone in Minet, we have 4 successful projects, is the scalability of the project itself. We want a project that can be replicated and scaled. Measurable, we need to have a positive impact that we can measure, the mitigation impact, the biodiversity impact, and the benefits on the people and communities, and address the various KPIs that were set in place, and have a potential growth to be run through the accelerator to make sure of its success and mobilization of finance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have maybe 5 minutes. I don't know if anyone wants to offer any other follow-up comments or if there's any questions from the audience. Yeah, I think.
Thank you. My question is directed to the latter speaker. I'd like to know what exactly is the difference between the ecosystem-based adaptation and nature-based solutions. Where is the difference? Because there's always this gray area between the two.
Between the well, the ecosystem, I think it's a broader that include not just nature, it includes the whole ecosystem that runs around it. So, and the nature-based solution, we focus more on this actual guidebook is on the coastal area only, not just the whole various ecosystem of nature in general, more or less.
I think so.
Merci pour la question. Merci, Rodrigo.
Thank you for the question.
Le point important qu'il faut vraiment retenir en termes de différence entre l'adaptation basée sur les écosystèmes et l'approche des SFN se focalise sur la partie sociale, la partie de l'inclusion sociale. L'approche eco-based adaptation est focalisée sur la partie de la restauration des écosystèmes. Mais il n'y a pas la partie de l'inclusion sociale. L'approche des SFN rajoute cette partie qui est telle que on est dans l'application de la solution à la croisée des chemins entre le volet social, le volet environnemental et le volet économique. Donc, les communautés locales sont au cœur des solutions fondées sur la nature parce qu'à travers ces solutions-là, il y a vraiment un bénéfice en termes économiques qui en découle et puis un bien-être social de façon générale. Ce que l'approche EBA ne prend pas en compte. Voilà.
So for her, the key point of the distinction between those two is that the nature-based solutions, it's really at the crossroads between economic, environmental and social, particularly social solutions. It really focuses and includes the community and the social element of it. Any other questions? And I appreciate the speakers for keeping it very, very short, which enables us to have a little bit of room for this. One question there.
Yeah, thank you very much. Daniel, if I quote you correctly, you said at the beginning, there aren't that many nature-based solutions which might have informed policy, or I forgot the other one, fund allocation or something. And then going forward, for example, you might have seen the World Bank's report on storage, which was published, I don't know, a few months back. There's still growing interest in the nature-based solution. Where do you think should be the priority focus in making nature-based solution more mainstream? What do you think?
Thank you very much for your thought, and sure, you know, I can offer some thoughts. Maybe my colleagues here can do the same. I think there's several elements, you know. So maybe I'll think of two. One is the clarity and more recognition, more evidence of what the nature-based solution can offer and what are the limitations. And you know, when you're a decision maker and you have a certain budget, budgets are always so limited, no? You feel like you're taking, you might feel like you're taking some risk. Like, you know, the example that we're talking here with wetlands, with the wetlands colleague, you know, that success rate you talked about in that particular case, Rodrigo, 15%. Now, then, you know, he said, you know, if you said it right, he could go up, you know, they could go much higher in the success rate. But there's that element of novelty, I think, and lack of still more concrete evidence of, or more wider evidence, you know. So I think there's that. But, you know, I say this with a very clear kind of, at the same time, caveat that I don't think that should be a reason. I understand it, but I think we have to kind of keep on going and keep on finding the right ways to show how it works and show the limitations as well. And I think some of the limitations you can mitigate by forming the right partnerships and by combining the type of adaptation package, let's say, that you're bringing to the need or to the challenge. So maybe, you know, you can combine some important nature-based solutions with other ways of thinking about adaptation, with other ways of risk management that are, you know, aligned with the community's needs, and that way, not, let's say, put all the eggs in one basket. That's what I would say, but maybe there's deeper thoughts here.
I guess I'll build on your point around the kind of evidence space around nature-based solutions. You know, we often see regulation in the water space is very, as it has been historically, kind of very rule-based. You need to achieve, if I give the example of CSO spills, you know, sewage spills, you need to achieve an X amount reduction. And unfortunately, the challenge around nature-based solutions is that we don't necessarily have the evidence base to say that will happen, or we find that they're more variable in their performance than a traditional grey infrastructure solution in the urban context. And I think building that evidence base will help us make those kind of solutions and those decisions easier for the decision makers to make. I think the second element for me is around the investment side of it. And I think there's two pieces there. There's first, making sure that those investment cases are robust, and also bridging the gap between the kind of technical nature-based solutions knowledge, but the world of financing. You know, we need to speak their language, and we need to go and meet people like Sharin from HSBC in the middle, and set out that investment case in a way that it is financeable and can provide the return on investment that's needed.
And unfortunately, I think we have to close it there. So we have heard examples from the UK, Alaska and the American Northwest, Cote d'Ivoire, Indonesia, etc. And also we've heard about cities with very diverse sustainability and water problems. And elsewhere, the context may be different, but we know the basic keys to success. We've heard about effective public-private partnerships, sustainable agriculture, responding to community needs, considering 6 different dimensions of capital. Rapid deployment was mentioned by several speakers, measurable KPIs as well, innovative financing mechanisms like thematic bonds, and also policy integration. So I am sure this will be useful to policymakers and everyone else. The innovations are there, nature-based solutions are there, waiting to be applied. And we can think of it as a toolbox. The more we work on nature-based solutions, the more we use them, the more tools we will have in the toolbox, and we will know which one is the right one to apply and more likely to succeed. So now comes it doesn't come, it continues the work of researchers, practitioners, policymakers. So I encourage you to continue the conversation right here in the pavilion and offline. So thank you to our speakers again. Thank you all for coming and for watching online. And I invite you to check the program of the Water for Climate Pavilion through COP. And I wish you all a very successful and useful and action-packed COP28. Thank you.